authority from communities. It also introduces a mixed member proportional representation system without clarity, enforceable quotas, or institutional readiness. These risks creating a system ripe for party manipulation under the pretext of inclusion. Bill 7 bypasses public participation, one of the most sacred pillars of constitutional amendment, by pushing a bill that was not demanded by the people, but crafted in elite political circles. This is not an effort to strengthen constitutional democracy. It is an attempt to weaken it under the smoke screen of reform. It is a power project masquerading as a legal proposal. It does not protect the Constitution, it undermines it. It does not empower the people, it sidelines them. It does not reflect Zambia's aspiration. It reflects the anxieties of incumbency. Let us not dress fear of political accountability as constitutional necessity. Bill 7 is not constitutional development. It is political backsliding dressed in legal language. It must be withdrawn fully and permanently, not merely deferred and rejected firmly and without compromise. What Bill 7 does not do and why that matters. At this critical juncture, Zambia is not merely in need of legislative amendments. It needs urgent national transformation. The challenges we face are not theoretical. They are lived realities of millions of Zambians every day. Zambia today is poorer than it was at independence in 1964. Zambia's GDP in real terms has stagnated. In some periods, declined significantly since the 1970s, while poverty levels remain persistently high. Zambia remains nearly at the bottom of the world in terms of the Human Development Index. And more than half of the population still lives below the national poverty line. These are the issues we should be discussing, not Bill 7. In 1964, the country had a promising industrial base, supported by copper wealth and modest population pressure. Today, despite more advanced technologies and global access, the average Zambian is more vulnerable, more unemployed, and more underserved than they were 6 decades ago. Despite decades of political transformation, economic reforms, and constitutional changes, the lived reality of millions remain one of hardship, anger, and hopelessness. Friends, we face a demographic crisis driven by unsustainable population growth that is outpacing our economic, social, and infrastructure capacities. We face a social crisis. Poverty is widespread, and the cost of living continues to soar. Our hospitals are under-resourced, our schools overcrowded and underfunded. Our rural communities remain disconnected from opportunities and essential services. We are facing a deepening governance crisis. These are the issues we should be focusing on. Mismanagement, wastage, corruption, and the outright looting of public resources remain entrenched and rarely punished. Oversight institutions are underfunded, subject to political interference, and themselves tainted by corruption. Citizens' trust in leadership is steadily eroding as public officials continue to act with impunity. Worse still, the law meant to serve justice and protect the public is increasingly being weaponized to silence dissent, shield the powerful, and target political opponents. When legal institutions become tools of repression rather than accountability, the very foundation of democratic governance are placed at risk. Worse still, Zambia is more divided along ethnic, regional, and cultural fault lines more than at any time in its 60-year post-independence history. Political competition has increasingly exploited these divisions, reducing national dialogue to ethnic arithmetic and undermining the founding vision of one Zambia, one nation. Elections have become flashpoint for ethnic tension, and public appointments are widely perceived, rightly or wrongly, as favoring particular regions. This perception has deepened grievances among communities, eroded public trust, and hardened identity-based politics. These divisions are no longer widespread. They are mainstreamed in discourse, mobilized in campaigns, and weaponized in governance. Our democracy cannot thrive when identity becomes a barrier to equal opportunity or political recognition. A constitutional amendment that ignores this threat is not just negligent, it is complicit in deepening these challenges. Friends, Bill 7 has breached Article 90 of the Constitution. By sponsoring and advancing this bill, the President has breached a foundational promise made to Zambian people under Article 90, that executive authority derives from the people and shall be exercised in a manner compatible with the principles of social justice and for the people's well-being and benefit. This clause is not just poetic language, it is constitutional law. It imposes a direct obligation on the presidency to act always in pursuit of equity, human dignity, public interest. It is a fiduciary standard that holds the head of state accountable to the people. Friends, Bill 7 flouts this obligation at every turn. Bill 7 increases the cost of governance through an expanded parliament at a time when basic services are underfunded and debt is crippling the economy. It removes voters from the equation, allowing party leadership to decide who represents citizens in parliament, thus silencing democratic choice. It undermines decentralization, reversing gains in empowering local governance and communities. It offers no relief to unemployment, no investment in public health or education, and no policies to reduce inequality, the very essence of social justice. Friends, social justice is about inclusion, equity, dignity, none of which are advanced by Bill 7. In fact, the bill privileges political insiders and entrenches inequality by making power more exclusive and less accountable. Friends, to propose such a bill, knowing its content and consequences, is to disregard the constitutional principle that executive power must be exercised for the well-being and benefit of all citizens. This is not a technical error. It is a constitutional betrayal. Let us be clear. A president who violates Article 90 is not merely misgoverning. He is governing unlawfully. and a constitution that is ignored by those who sought to uphold it becomes a tool of manipulation and not an instrument of justice. In light of Bill 7, in light of Article 90, Bill 7 is not just a bad law. It is an unconstitutional act of presidential overreach. It must be withdrawn in defense of people's well-being and the rule of law. Friends, a constitution is not a convenience document for those in power. It is a covenant between the people and the state, the supreme law that governs not only what power is exercised, but how it is exercised and for whom. Amending the Constitution is not a routine legislative task. It is a solemn act that must meet the highest standards of necessity, legitimacy, and public participation. Any proposed amendment must be grounded in demonstrable national need and must reflect the aspiration and concerns of the people, not the calculation of political elites. What Bill 7 reveals is the disturbing weaponization of constitutional reform for political gain. The amendments it proposes are not motivated by pursuit of justice, inclusion, or national development. They are motivated by political consolidation, clothed in legal language, but driven by the desire to entrench power and weaken the safeguards of accountability. Friends, there is no national emergency so widespread, public outcry, and no civic campaign calling for these changes. There is no evidence of meaningful public consultation, no endorsement by civil society, the church, or professional organization. There is no clear constitutional defect that necessitates this overhaul. Instead, there is political engineering masquerading as constitutional reform. This is why Bill 7 is dangerous. It sets a precedent that constitution can be reshaped not to meet public needs, but to serve public political interests. If allowed to pass, it will weaken the Constitution, not in content, but in principle, inviting future leaders to do the same whenever it suits them. Friends, let us not allow Zambia to become a country where constitution bends to politics. Instead, politics must bend to the constitution. As a member of the legal fraternity, we are not neutral when constitutionalism is under threat. The law is not merely our profession. It is our duty, our calling, and our charge to the Republic. In moments of constitutional danger, silence from lawyers is complicity. Passivity from the legal community is betrayal of our oath to uphold justice, democracy, and the rule of law. The stakes are too high for indifference, friends. If we, the lawyers of Zambia, do not speak now, when the constitution is being distorted for partisan gain, then we forfeit our moral authority to speak on any matter of public importance. We must recall that this is not the first time a constitutional bill has sought to subvert public accountability. We stood firm against Bill 10 on constitutional grounds. Today, with Bill 10, the threat is of similar nature, cloaked in reform, driven by political self-interest. If we were right to oppose Bill 10, we are obligated by principle to oppose Bill 7 with the same clarity and conviction. Let us be clear. In the same way that the general election of 2021 became a referendum on Bill 10 and its constitutional implication, the general election of 2026 must serve as a referendum on Bill 7. Let every vote cast not reflect a political choice, but a constitutional judgment. We must publicly and professionally oppose Bill 7, not out of partisanship, but out of fidelity to the Constitution. Defend democracy, the supremacy of the Constitution, as amended in 2016, not as a perfect document, but as a democratic milestone achieved through national compromise. Mobilize institutions, LAS is one of them, the academia, and to educate, litigate, and organize around this threat. Let us remind Parliament that the legal community is watching, and let the courts equally be alert, and the people will remember. Stand in solidarity with civil society and ordinary citizens, affirming that the Constitution belongs to all of us, and it should not be rewritten without us. To every Zambian, your choice matters. Demand transparency. Insist on your right to be heard, educate, organize, speak up. The Constitution belongs to you. It is your vigilance that will protect it. This is our constitutional moment, friends. It is not a time for whispering in corridors. It is time to raise our voices with conviction and courage. Law association, legal scholars, civil society must lead this defense, not with emotion, but with constitutional clarity and unshakable commitment to justice. Let the general election of 2026 be a moment of democratic reckoning, just as the 2021 election signaled a national repudiation of 2020 of Bill number 10. Let the coming election declare with equal force that Zambians reject Bill 7, not only for what it proposes, but for the manner in which it betrays people's trust. The ballot must once again speak for the Constitution. Let us say with clarity and conviction, by introducing and advancing Bill 7, the President has acted in direct contravention of Article 90. That act is not just legally unsound, it is morally indefensible. A president who governs contrary to the constitutional requirement to act in people's interest and uses power to entrench advantage forfeits the moral and democratic legitimacy to seek another mandate. He has lost the right to ask the people for a second term. Likewise, any member of Parliament who votes in favor of this bill cannot claim to represent the people. They will have proven themselves to be defenders of power and not protectors of the people. They will have voted against the will of the electorate, against constitutional clarity, and against Zambia's democratic aspirations. Such leaders do not deserve to return to the National Assembly. Let the people of Zambia take note. Let communities across the country remember that the Constitution was under threat and who stood on which side. Let this moment mark a new standard of democratic accountability. Those who break trust with the Constitution must be denied the power to speak in its name. Let the ballot in the general election of 2026 become a national tribunal, a democratic reckoning, a referendum not just on Bill 7, but on the values we choose to uphold. Let us remember, friends, constitutions do not collapse because they are overthrown. They collapse because those who should defend them choose to stay silent. Today, Zambia's constitution is watching. It is watching our parliament. It is watching our president. It is watching us. The legal fraternity, civil society, and every citizen privileged to live under its protection. It is watching to see whether those sworn to protect it will stand firm or fade into silence. It is watching to see the values, if the values enshrined in it, in its text, democracy, justice, inclusion, and dignity, will be defended in practice, not recited on paper. Friends, the Constitution has no voice of its own. Let's not forget that. The Constitution has no voice of its own. It cannot walk to court. It cannot raise a placard. It cannot convene a press conference. It relies on us, its custodians, to protect it. We must be the voice of the Constitution when it is in peril. We must be its shield when it is under attack. We must be its sword when injustice dares to reshape it for private gain. Friends, Bill 7 violates Article 61. It violates Article 90. It violates the values in Article 8. And it violates the people's trust. The Constitution is watching, and one day the people of Zambia and history itself will ask, where were you when the Constitution was in danger? Let the answer be, we stood up, we spoke out, we said no, not in our name, not to our Constitution, not for our future. Let this address not be remembered for what it opposes, but for what it affirms, that Zambia belongs to its people, that power is trust, and that constitutional democracy is not negotiable. We stand today as its guardians, and we shall not fail our duty. Thank you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we give State Council another round of applause. Thank you. Thanks very much, State Council, for that vibrant keynote presentation. So my key takeaway is that Bill 7 does not represent constitution making, but rather it presents constitutional backsliding, and we must reject it firmly and without compromise. And that while the decision to defer the bill by the President is welcome, what is needed is actually to permanently withdraw the bill and let there be a better process, a credible process for reworking our Constitution. So thanks very much. At this stage, I would like to begin the panel discussion. Unfortunately, I'm informed that Professor Lumina will not manage to join us because of technical challenges joining online. And therefore, we'll have the four people here in front to take your questions, your comments. But I'll start with a request to Ms. Linda Kasonde and Dr. Banda to give their reaction to State Council's presentation. Each one will have about 10 minutes. And I request you to focus more on the provisions or key elements in the proposed bill and what these entail for constitutionalism or governance. So if I may start with Dr. Banda Landline. Would you want to speak from there or come to the podium? Okay. So you can come here if it's not working.
It doesn't seem to be working. Thank you very much, everyone, and a warm welcome to every one of us who are here speaking to this very important issue on the Constitution. I would like to start by echoing what State Counsel Mr. John Sangwa has said about the Constitution. And thank you so much. There are a number of issues from a very substantive point of view that I would like to echo with what State Counsel Mr. Sangwa has said, which is first and foremost, from my opinion and from the opinion of the Law Association of Zambia and from where I come from, that we seem to be betraying the history of constitution making in our country. The bill that has been proposed to a very large extent seems to highlight one of, and I'll give kudos to the state for this, that it seems to a very large extent to speak to a number of the recommendations that have been made in the constitution making process and in the constitution making history of the country. Proportional representation, councillors, and so on and so forth. But when you look at the nitty-gritties of what the bill proposes, it actually, to a very large extent, betrays some of the proposals that have been made. And I would like to start here by saying that most of the proposals that have been made in the bill were proposals that have been made throughout the constitution-making process of the country. But nonetheless, when you look at the substance of those provisions, we have a number of gaps, and I would like to speak to each and every one of them, if I may. First and foremost, the bill proposes proportional representation. So when it comes to proportional representation, we are talking about what is called a mixed member proportional representation, and also we are talking about a constituency-based parliamentary system. So if you are aware about constitution-making processes in the country, we started with the Mwanakatwe constitution-making process, which proposed a mixed member proportional representation system. But when we went to the Mvunga Commission, and I don't want to get into the whole history of constitution making process, but we have for a very long time proposed constitutional representation and proportional representation. What we have in this bill is a very cosmetic it's a very cosmetic representation of what we've been seeing in the previous constitution making processes. So what does this bill actually try to achieve in terms of proportional representation as the first point of call? If you read the bill, it has a number of thresholds that it tries to achieve. One of them is proportional representation. If you read the bill and you read what we have been trying to do as a country, they are at parallels, right? So it says that we want to achieve a mixed member proportional representation. What does that mean? It means that we have what are called members of parliament who will stand for a seat in a constituency-based seat, meaning that you as a citizen, you will vote for a member of parliament because you belong to a constituency. Secondly, it also says that you will have a member of parliament who will be appropriated to a position based on the votes that have been cast by virtue of a political party standing. Now, that's very problematic, and we stand to answer questions. Why that is very problematic is this. It's that it does not meet a number of thresholds when it comes to proportional representation. And I would like to call this what is called tokenism. Why? It says women, youth, and persons with disability will have 20 seats in parliament by virtue of you having sat or you having a card in the voter registration or you being a political party. This betrays what we have seen in the previous constitutional review commissions and in the constitutional technical committees. So, what does this actually mean? It means this, that we have increased the number of constituencies by 55. By increasing the number of constituencies by 55 constituencies, that may not be problematic in and of itself, but if we get to the nitty-gritties of it, it has a problem. And maybe I can dwell on this. In 2020, the Minister of Justice stood in Parliament and said that there was a delineation report that was done. And that delineation report said that there were 90 constituencies that were created. Now, those 90 constituencies that were created were done on the basis of a certain methodology that the Electoral Commission had done. To this day, we haven't seen that report. What this bill does is that it tells us that we are creating about 50-55 constituencies. We do not know what the methodology of the introduction of these constituencies is. And I would like to start with this, right? Constitution making, democracy, is about people. It's not about the state. What we have seen, one of the cracks and one of the most difficult aspects of what we are seeing with this bill is this. It's the issue of proportional representation. They have told us, the government, the ECZ has told us that they carried out a delineation process and there is a report. Unfortunately, none of us, and I can challenge any one of you, if you have seen that report, you can give it to me, you can give it to us. We haven't seen that report. The problem with not seeing that report is we do not know how the delineation process has been in terms of how many constituencies are there. The report that was given in 2020 by the Minister of Justice then, and the proposal that is being made in the draft amendment are not in tandem. The report said 90 constituencies. The draft constitutional amendment says 50. So we do not know the amendment. But then I will always ask this question. Why should a public document about how a Zambian should cast their vote in their constituency be a document that is not released to Zambians? That creates a challenge. So, when we are saying the mixed member proportional representation is very challenging in terms of why we have come up with a number of constituencies is challenging, it baffles all of us. We have more questions than we have answers, right? Secondly, we have a mixed member proportional representation that does not meet the threshold that was done in the previous constitution making processes. And this is what I want to speak to. When you look at the constitutional history of the country, the mixed member proportional representation has always been something that has been welcome. Starting from 1991 with the Manakatwe review, the Mvunga, 1996 Manakatwe, and so on. We have always welcomed mixed member proportional representation. But what is introduced in this bill is not what we imagined. It was what we call tokenism. And this is why I say so. The number of members of parliament has been increased, on one hand, constituency based. But the number of members of parliament that has been increased based on proportional representation is 3-tier. Women, youth, persons with disabilities. With women, it's 20. With youth, it's 20. With persons with disability, it's 3. Now, when you look at that, what it simply tells you is that the political party that was standing in that particular general election will get 20 seats, right? Get 20 seats. There is no actual methodology as to how those 20 seats will be apportioned. In my opinion, I would go back to the Mungomba, I would go back to the technical committee's report, which apportioned these seats based on certain percentages. The technical committee said that a political party that has at least 5% of the votes of the electorate will get the seats in parliament, which means that only serious political parties that are contending will have a seat in parliament. Meaning that if you are a political party and you are, excuse the word, you are joking, right? You are not going to get members of parliament to make decisions in parliament, right? But if you are a political party that is actually working on the ground and you have grassroots and you have people working on the ground, you have an electorate, then you can have a seat in parliament. What the bill does is that it doesn't create that sort of methodology. It departs from what we have seen. By the way, the constitution-making process of this country and where this bill comes from a very long history of constitution-making, right? And this history of constitution-making comes from way back in 1991, 1996, 2005, 2011, and so on. All these proposals have been made for a very long time. But what we see in this particular bill is that it betrays what we have been trying to achieve. The mixed member proportional representation, for example, right? It only speaks to the fact that a political party that stood in an election will have women, persons with disabilities, and youth. 20 seats each, which is very tokenism. But it doesn't take into account the very fact that a political party must have one intra-party democracy to ensure that women, youth, and persons with disabilities who have been very vigorous in advocating for a seat in parliament and decision making have a seat in parliament. So what does that mean? In my opinion, it's tokenism. Why? We have seen previously and actually currently that the people who have been nominated to be members of parliament, there is no person with disability in parliament right now. The number of women that have been appointed to positions is a cry. If we were to get into the nitty-gritties, there is a matter that has gone to court in terms of who are the people, who are the women that have been appointed to be decision makers. Very few. It's tokenism. Right? So what we are seeing now is this, that if you leave this provision as it is, the historical challenges that have plagued the vulnerable groups being youth, persons with disabilities, and women will continue. Political parties will simply say, he's told me I have 5 minutes, I had a lot to say, but anyway, we'll cut to the chase. Political parties will simply say, women, you have 20, so you can stand. We'll give you the 20% quota. Persons with disabilities, you have 3. Youth, you have 20, and that's what we'll give to you. And that is what will stand. It will not devolve into intra-party, the democracy that we are expecting. That is my cry with this particular provision. What is my call or recommendation to the government? Let's get back to what the people have said. The people of Zambia have consistently talked about proportional mixed member representation in 1991, 1996, through the Mwanakatwe, Mvunga, and Mungomba Commission and the Technical Committee. They have said that this particular issue should be dealt with at the point of the political parties ensuring that there are women, there are vulnerable groups representing people in parliament. What we are seeing in this bill is not the case. That's one. Number 2, we are talking about proportional representation at parliamentary level, right? The Constitution of Zambia says that devolution, meaning giving power back to the people through local governance, is one of the most important aspects. The Constitution, this provision doesn't do that, meaning that proportional representation is not an aspect that is reflected in local governance. That is the local government level. it doesn't do that. So you can have proportional representation at parliamentary level, but you won't have proportional representation at local government level. But the constitution and the vision of Zambia, if you look at Article 9, Article 7, Article 8 of the constitution, is to devolve power back to the people. If we are devolving power back to the people, it means that the proportional representation aspect must be reflected in local governance, but the local governance aspect does not represent proportional representation. He told me that I have 5 minutes, so I'll really try to as much cut to the chase. The Constitution also represents another aspect that we are trying to run away from: introduction of members of parliament in local governance. What it does, this bill, is this: that it brings members of parliament into local government, a thing that we have tried to run away from. What local government is that decisions should be made at grassroots level by the people, without the interference of members of parliament at national level. So there are two different types of considerations. Members of parliament make decisions at a national level, also taking into account different constituency-based decisions. But when you put members of parliament into local councils, that dilutes the level of local governance. Now, this particular bill introduces members of parliament into local governance, which is a thing that we've been trying to run away from for a very long time. I think that is very undesirable. Another thing that it does, this constitution, is that it introduces a tenure of parliament. What it says is that members of parliament will be members until the last day of the election. That is a general election. So you have a general election tomorrow, but the member of parliament sits. But what it also does is that for 90 days of that period, the member of parliament is doing nothing. Legislatively, there is no legitimacy for the functions of a member of parliament to continue holding a position that the constitution has mandated you to sit on if you are not performing those functions, but you continue to get a remuneration for a function that you are not performing. For me, that is problematic. You are a member of parliament and you are not performing the functions of a member of parliament for 90 days, 3 months. But you are remunerated for that because parliament has been dissolved. That's very problematic. Very importantly, in my opinion, the bill also takes away power from the people, and I would like to acquiesce what State Council has said, that where there is a vacancy in a constituency-based seat, the political party that has won that seat fills in a candidate. Meaning what? So I vote Mulongoshi. Let's say this Mulongoshi is a constituency. We have voted for a member of parliament. That member of parliament comes from the Red Party. That member of parliament then is declared vacant. Instead of having a by-election, the political party that won the seat gets the position. Why is that problematic in terms of democratic consolidation? It's this, that it takes away the power from the people to decide who their leader will be. It gives power to the political party. That is what this bill is doing. It is giving more power to political parties than to the voter. The voter has the right to decide who their political leader should be. We have consistently talked, give me one more minute, Brian. We have consistently talked about by-elections, and we have also consistently said that by-elections are very expensive, and we should as much as possible run away from by-elections. But here's my opinion: democracy is expensive. You cannot run away from the expense of democracy. The power of the people is expensive. The power of the people to cast a vote for a leader that they want to govern them is expensive. It requires an election, and an election is not cheap. So we have to choose our heart. One, do we decide that the political party that we voted for becomes what chooses our member of parliament, or do we retain power in the people to choose a member of parliament? If you look at this constitution, what it simply does is this: it gives power to a political party. But in our system, we are not a country that votes for a political party. We are a country that votes for a person to govern us. Now, if you are voting for a person, that means that by-elections should continue. Unfortunately, with this situation, it also means that whenever there is a vacancy in a member of parliament for a constituency-based seat, based on what this provision says, is that we should have a by-election. As expensive as it can be. But as I can reiterate, democracy is expensive. The power of the people is expensive. It requires a vote. Now, if you take away that power from the people and you give it to the political party, what it simply means is that now we are empowering the political party to be the decision makers. The member of parliament that will represent you is not the member of parliament that you have chosen. It will be the member of parliament that the party has chosen. Right? That's problematic to me, because it takes away from the very essence of what a democracy is. Two, we are talking about mixed member proportional representation at parliamentary level, but the Constitution in and of itself says that the most important level of governance is devolution, meaning councils, local governance, but the devolution does not trickle down to the councils. The mixed member proportional representation is not reflected in the local governance, in the local government level. At local government level, we do not have proportional representation. The Constitution says that proportional representation should be the heart of governance, but it doesn't reflect that at the heart of governance, which the Constitution says, which is local government. To me, that's a serious problem, because if we are to start with proportional representation, we are supposed to start with the grassroots, which is local government, and then parliamentary, and then going forward. The Constitution doesn't do that, right? Which is, to me, a problem. I'd like to highlight another issue, which is the bill also proposes that we are going to have mayors, councillors, and deputy councillors. But what it doesn't give us is, when are the deputy mayors going to be elected? It doesn't give us that aspect. It simply says that we have mayors, We have deputy mayors who will be elected at a council and the first sitting, but it doesn't say when that first sitting is. Local government is a serious problem that we have faced in this country. For those of you that have followed the politics of local government in this country, a deputy mayor, a deputy councillor, a deputy chairperson of a council is a very important aspect. The Constitution doesn't give us that. By and large, what does it give us? And I'm looking at O'Brien, who's looking at me. What does this mean? It just calls for wider consultation in terms of what we're trying to achieve in this constitution-making process. Yes, some of the provisions are very welcome in terms of their conceptualization, but to me, we are departing to a very large extent from what we have always talked about since 1991, 1996, 2005, 2011. What this bill does is that it departs. Also, I may add, there are so many other issues that the bill does not address, which the Zambian people have been crying for. For example, and if I dare say so, the appointment of ministers outside parliament. That is an issue that has been a cry of the Zambian people since 1991. So holistically, if we are to be genuine about our constitutional reform, we have to look at so many other issues. We do welcome, for example, the government's call for wider consultation with this bill. But nonetheless, it still leaves a lot to be desired. And I would like to echo here an important aspect about constitution making, which is that constitution making is not just a political process, it's not a legal process, it's a social process, it's an interaction. One of the things that we need to avoid is to have an us and them perspective. There's a government perspective, there's a civil society perspective, there's an academia perspective. No, we are all trying to achieve a common goal when it comes to the Constitution. After all, it is the grand norm, it is the norm that governs us. But if we continue having a negative attitude about constitution making, where we look at what the government has said, and we look at what civil society has said, and those things are opposite and diametrically opposed, then we're missing the plot. We are trying to achieve the same thing. The perspective that civil society gives, the perspectives that academia gives, the perspectives that the government gives should be seen as a common goal. But the us and them perspective doesn't help us. And another call to the media is try to unite us. Try to galvanize what we say from the different perspectives of the constitution making process. And if we don't, we'll always be seen as being on opposite sides when we're trying to achieve a common goal. To a large extent, you can see that some of the provisions and some of the proposals in this bill are based on what has been said. But how they are being introduced and how they are trying to be achieved is almost diametrically opposed to what we have been talking about. One more minute. One more minute is this. The constitution-making process is a duty for all of us. Mr. Sangwa was my lecturer, and one of the things that he said is that people will not appreciate the constitution and constitution-making process if they do not see a relationship between the constitution and putting food on their table. That is an important issue. We should not make the constitution-making process an elitist process. It is a process that belongs to each and every one of us. There is nothing about the constitution that is complicated. The constitution is just simply about you and me. It's about you putting food on your table. It is about you being able to speak as a citizen. The problem is that we make constitution-making process, and even the narratives that will come from this dialogue and the narratives that were made before this dialogue, they were made so complicated. Constitution-making is not complicated. It's about you as a citizen being able to voice out what you think should be in the Constitution, what you think should not be in the Constitution. But if you do not see a relationship between who you are as a citizen and the Constitution, then we're missing the plot. It's not an elitist perspective. There is a relationship between the Constitution and you putting food on your table. And if you don't see that, I think then that is where, as technocrats, we are missing the plot. And then you should call us out that you are not telling us why the Constitution is important between me and putting food on the table. And I think that is a conversation that we actually need to have beyond the substantive technical aspects of what is contained in the legalistic language, mixed member, proportional representation, and so on and so forth. Relate to the Constitution on the basis of where you are sitting, and then talk to us. Thank you.
Thanks very much to my colleague, Dr. Landline Banda, for the elaboration on the key provisions that might be problematic in the draft. So at this stage, I would like to welcome to the podium our former last president, Madam Ms. Linda Kasonde, to discuss what key provisions she would in relation to governance and constitutionalism. And if you might focus on those Landilani has not traversed so far. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I want to first start with saying that I listened to the airing of the meeting between the president, the Republican president, and civil society the other day. And one thing struck me about the president's remarks. He seemed to be suggesting that the criticism of Bill 7 was somehow a personal attack against him individually. And I think, as State Council has rightly pointed out, the criticisms of Bill 7 are far from being personal. They're actually rooted in the Constitution, and specifically, as State Council has said, in Article 61 with regards to our lawmakers' duty to answer to the people who put them in office, and Article 90, which requires the President to exercise his executive functions in the best interests of us as citizens. Power derives from the people, and I think we often forget that as citizens. History has taught us many times that we are so powerful. We saw it with the movement for multi-party democracy. We saw it with the campaign against the third-term bid by President Chiluba. And we saw it not once, but twice with Bill 10. And so we know our power, and we need to be reminded of it. And that is essentially what has caused this back down by the government to allow broader consultations, which are most welcome. But I'll get to what I think about the issue of deferment a bit later in my presentation. So Mr. Sangwa talked about the fact that when a process of constitutional reform or amendments is being undertaken, it must always be done in the interests of the citizens. And so to point to an issue that Nalilani has not raised, I'll point to the issue of the increase in the number of MPs. So as he highlighted, the number of elected seats would increase to 211, and then there'd be an additional 20 seats for women, an additional 20 seats for youth, and 3 for persons with disabilities. In total, that's an additional 90 seats, I believe, somewhere around there. And if you look, indeed, from 156 to 211, plus 20, plus 20, plus 3, it's about 90 seats. Now, members of parliament, I think, on average, I think the vice president earns about 2.4 million, and the lowest paid MP earns 1.2 million, somewhere thereabouts. And at the end of Parliament, these MPs get a gratuity. That gratuity is 35% of the gross annual emoluments multiplied by the number of years that the MP has been in office. And they get paid tax-free. Just to illustrate how much that is, in 2023, the gratuity for MPs was 498 million kwacha. It was subsequently increased in the budget to 1 billion in 2024. So that's for the existing 156 MPs. Now try increasing that by a good 57 to 60%. That's the cost of how much it will pay to pay not only the emoluments but also the gratuity of MPs. How is that in the best interest of this nation? A nation grappling with public debt, a nation grappling with poverty, a nation in which many people are struggling to find employment. Just think about that. Now, I won't talk about the issue of by-elections, but just to touch on it briefly. Not only is democracy expensive, it is necessary because it reflects the will of the people. And the will of a political party is not necessarily the will of the people. And so our democratic rights are being taken away from us by the party selecting who the candidate will be in the event of a vacancy. Not only that, it can also lead to the unintended consequence of validly and democratically elected candidates being forced out of office by their political party and replaced by somebody who they think is more convenient to their interests. Now, as the only woman on the panel out of 6 speakers, including the moderator, whatever the number is, I feel a duty to specifically talk about gender inclusion and why it's important. On Wednesday, I launched my book, Thoughts on Democracy and Womanhood, and what I wanted to do by writing that book was to illustrate the link between democracy and gender inclusion. And for me, nowhere is that better illustrated than the story I told in my first book, which is that narrated by the Swedish foreign minister. And she talks about 2 warring factions fighting over a river on a map. And they're fighting and they can't seem to resolve the issue. And then finally they introduce women to the conversation. And the women point out that the river on the map has dried up many years ago, and so they're fighting over nothing. But how did the women know that? They knew that because they're the ones who went to draw water from the river. They're the ones who do the cleaning, the laundry, the cooking, and so their lived experience enabled those warring factions to resolve their dispute. And that is the power of bringing gender inclusivity in decision-making in our country. And in fact, at the very same occasion of my launch, Elias Chipimo made the comment that perhaps if more women were involved in the decision-making around the current impasse on our former Republican president's funeral, perhaps this issue would have been put to bed a long time ago. The other issue on the panel today, as I mentioned, we've got 5 men, and they have all very different lived experiences. Some have experienced rural life, others urban. Some, they're very well educated, they've experienced affluence and at different times of their lives, maybe lack. And yet I am one woman, a fraction of the population, here to represent so many different lived experiences of so many different women. And that doesn't seem fair to me. It is not. It's incumbent on us to really realize that women have a place in our society. And it's not enough to have 1 or 2, because we have different experiences. And just to mention a number of issues that you're leaving to the men in parliament to resolve on behalf of women are things like period poverty, things like maternal and child health, things like education for your children, things like gender-based violence, and the defilement of your children. Now, if we don't have enough women at the table making decisions about our own lives, we're missing out. We're really missing out. Just to conclude on the issue of the decision by the President to request the Minister of Justice to defer the debate on Bill 7, I think we need to be very cautiously optimistic. On the one hand, it shows that government is responding to the people's opposition to Bill 7. On the other hand, there is a possibility that it could be used as a cover for legitimizing Bill 7. And I'll explain this by illustrating the other bills where this has happened. In other words, the government's track record on making promises to make more progressive laws. So, for example, the government told the people of Zambia that when it came into office in 2021, that it would repeal and replace the Cyber Security and Cyber Crimes Act and replace it with a more progressive law that is in line with our Constitution. That law has been repealed and replaced, but with a far more regressive law that has sent a chill down the spine of citizens and the media. Not only that, this government also told us that the NGO Act, which was enacted in 2009, would also be repealed and reformed to be more progressive and in line with democratic norms. This is a law that threatens to constrain the roles and activities of civil society. And we all know how powerful civil society is and what a threat it can potentially be to the government. So now this government is in office, there is a proposed NGO bill which threatens to restrict civil society, similar to what we've seen in Zimbabwe and other countries in the region. This is not progress. And of course, there were utterances, or statements rather, by the Minister of Information, Cornelius Mwechwa, I think a year or two ago, that the statutory regulation of media would also be removed, that they wouldn't do it. And now he's come back and said, it's a possibility, it's there on the table. And that again will restrict citizens' access to credible and independent information, and therefore freedom of expression. We saw the same thing with the Access to Information Bill. So there is a track record here. Should we trust the government to do the right thing in terms of Bill 7? Again, as State Council has called upon all of you, it is incumbent on us to keep the pressure to ensure that our voice is heard. Bill 10 should never be on the table. It should be removed. And I think, as we've been calling for in civil society for several years, any constitutional reform process must be people-driven and not government-driven. And again, our lawmakers are not a law unto themselves. They are the servants of the people, as is the president. And so we get to tell the government what we want to see in our constitution. So I'll end there. We've definitely made some progress. We've pushed the government into deferring the bill, but it's not over. It's far from over. We need to push and make sure that Bill 7 never sees the light of day. Thank you very much, everyone.
Very much, Madam Linda Kasande, for your intervention. So at this stage, we come to the heart of the forum where you are free to ask questions or to make comments or give your contribution. But I propose first to start with the questions from the online audience. I have about 6 questions. I'll read these and let the panelists respond. And then after that, then I come to the audience here. So the first 4 comments, I think, relate to the presentation by State Council Sangwa. So the first one is excellent debate. So what is your suggestion of how government should carry out the consultation going forward? That's for State Council Sangwa. The next question for State Council Sangwa is, when is it legitimate for government to amend the Constitution using the mechanism provided for under Article 79 without carrying out any broad consultation? That's the second one. The third one is Mr. Sangwa standing in 2026? He has my vote. He has my vote. So you have at least 1 vote if you are standing next year. And the last one, I think it was a general comment. I logged into the last public forum for the constitutional reform. I thought the whole point would go into the document itself and dissect the provisions, but it looks more like a political speech. Okay, so that is one view. And then I have 2 broad comments that may be taken by any of the panelists. So the first one is from a gentleman known as Isaac Manza. He says, so if we agree that these proposals in the bill have been made by the people, but it's only the way they are couched which is a problem, why don't we agree to perfect the content than throw away what the people want? And the last one from the online audience is, I have heard the demerits of the bill. Kindly enlighten me on some of the positives of the bill. Thank you. So if we may start with State Council.
Okay. Can I do it from there?
Yeah, sure. Welcome.
Yeah. My note taking is very poor. So, if you may just remind me on the first question.
The first question is, how should government take the consultation going forward since they've defined the bill?
Okay. You know, I think we lack, constitution making is not something, or constitutional revision it's not something you do willy-nilly. You wake up, you don't like something, and then you decide to change. It's not. It's a very, very serious exercise to be undertaken. The overriding consideration is, what are you trying to fix? That's the starting point. What is Bill 7 trying to fix? What? Do we know? That is the biggest problem that we have. Let me just say something about, we talked about a lot of issues that are there in Bill 10. The question is, should we be talking about amendment of the Constitution? The answer is no, we shouldn't. We shouldn't, for two reasons. First of all, this Constitution was amended in 2016. Are you aware that some of the institutions that are supposed to be created, that have already been established by the Constitution, have actually not been actualized? Are you aware of that? Those are the issues we should be talking about. Is the Constitution as it stands complete? The answer is that it's not. You know, it's like you have a vehicle and the manufacturer tells you that this vehicle should have 10 wheels. Okay? Then you put 6, you put it on the road. Is that vehicle complete? Now, if that vehicle does not perform, will you be able to say, no, this vehicle is a bad vehicle? No. Put the 10 wheels first, run it, and only then will you make an assessment whether that vehicle is performing correctly or not. Okay, that is the problem we have. For instance, one institution that comes to mind is the creation of the Land Commission. Okay, it is there in the Constitution to say the management of land should not be exclusively in the hands of the Commission of Lands. Instead, there should be a Land Commission. That body has never been created. Okay. Secondly, there is also a requirement that a law must be passed to regulate political parties. You know, 9 years later, this law has not been passed. Okay, that law is intended to regulate how much money you pump into your campaign, and you have to declare the source of that money. I'm sure you understand why they are reluctant to pass such a law. And yet you are now focusing on cybersecurity, you are focusing on NGOs, but you're not focusing on addressing the real problem, because so much money goes into an election, okay, and the sources of that money is not known. Okay, in fact, every election cycle, we actually engage in money laundering, in illegal activities, because the sources are not of these funds are not known. Those are the issues that we should be talking about. Those are the issues that distort the quality of our democracy, not the issues that we are focusing. Now, what are when the Constitution is not complete in itself, how can you make an assessment of its viability? How? You have to finish that process first. Clean it up. Make sure. That is the conversation we should be having as a country. How well has the Constitution performed in the last, before that we say, have we done everything that the Constitution requires us to do? Because remember, the Constitution is simply a power map, and the details of what is supposed to happen is supposed to be contained in various pieces of legislation. Now, have we complied with the Constitution? We haven't. Why would you want to change something that you have not complied with first? Okay? You're not in a position to make any viable assessment. You're not. Okay? And that is why this Bill 7 is just a crazy project. You know? So it should not be entertained. It should not be entertained. It doesn't benefit anyone. It doesn't. And we have more pressing challenges, guys. We have bigger problems. I don't think at all Zambians understand the enormity of the economic and social challenges that we face. This country is broken. This country is broken. We are worse. We should be talking about economy. You know, I don't know whether you know this. Your GDP per capita in 1964 was in today's terms was well in excess of $2,300. Do you know what your debt per capita is today? 1,300. In 60 years, we have wasted 60 years. Those are the issues we should be talking about, not Bill 7. Yes. Okay? Do you know the population growth in Zambia? Do you know? Population growth is outpacing economic performance. We are sitting on a time bomb. Those are the issues, not Bill 7. Yes, sir. Guys, let's be serious as a country. If we don't change course, this country will just collapse. Those are the serious issues. If you tell me that Bill 7 will transform this country economically and improve our lives, I'll be the first one to campaign for it. Guys, this is a joke. We have more pressing issues. We've been preoccupied with all these things. Guys, who is running the economy? Exactly. Okay, why do you think they came here? Because they love us? No, because they're opportunities. And we're just preoccupied with silly things which do not transform this country. Remember, we have wasted 60 years of independence. Those years are gone. I feel sorry for you guys. I'm 60. I have lived my life. What about you? You have no reason to smile. You should be crying. You know, guys, let me divert a little bit. There's been this joke about delimitation. Guys, do you know what delimitation is all about? Huh? You know, and you guys, information is now readily available. All of you are tech savvy, right? Go and Google on the information that you have. First of all, this is a fraud. The idea of delimitation is a fraud. First of all, you can't begin to talk about creating new constituencies when you have not analyzed how the existing constituencies are working. Huh? First of all, analyze. You know, delimitation has nothing to do with creating new constituencies. It doesn't. It is about representation. The entire country is divided into 156 constituencies. The idea is that each MP must speak. Remember, we can't all go in parliament, right? We know this is very basic, isn't it? A member of parliament is there to represent people in his constituency, right? Now, guys, first of all, the current system is a fraud. It's not working. Let me give you an example. Do you know what the population is now? We are roughly 22 million. Right? How many constituencies do we have? 156. Now, the is about ensuring that each MP, okay, what you do is that you get 22 million, divide by 156 constituencies. What do you get? Huh? you get roughly 140,000 people. Meaning in each constituency, there should be plus or minus. That is what becomes now your national ratio. Delimitation is about ensuring that each constituency has roughly plus or minus 140,000 people. Now, that system is not working. I have to put a caveat to what I'm about to tell you. Do you know about the population of Lusaka? 3 million. Do you know the number of constituencies that exist in Lusaka? 12. Only 12. You get the point? Now, if we are talking about that, do you know what the population of Kanyama is? Over 500,000. You have one MP representing 500,000. How is that possible? How is that possible? Ordinarily, you should split Kanyama into roughly 3 constituencies. Do you know the smallest constituency? Guys, these are the issues we should be talking about. Now, people are talking about to say constituency development fund is necessary for development. How can Kanyama with 500,000 people receive the same amount as another constituency which has 20,000 people? Guys, the data is there. Data is there. Lusaka should have the highest number of MPs. Okay? But these things are not working. You want to introduce 20 more or 50 more. How? You don't even have the money. You are broke. How can you do that? That is completely irresponsible. You know, guys, let me give you an example. Zambezi West. Zambezi West, Northwestern Province, has 28,000 people. There's an MP there. Why would you have an MP? How? And Kanyama has one. Guys, tell me, on what planet does that make sense? These are the imperfections we ought to sort out first before attempting to add the number of constituencies. In fact, when you are broke, you cut down your expenditure. You don't increase. Guys, do you know what the debt ratio is? Our debt is nearly 100% of our GDP. Can somebody think for a moment how we are going to get out of this mess? I'm not attributing it to any single president, by the way. This is something that we have created. We are all complicit as Zambians for this particular mess over the last 60 years. Guys, those are the issues we should be talking about, not delimitation, not increasing the number of seats. In fact, we should be talking about reducing the number of seats. Not increasing. It's being irresponsible. You don't have money. Okay? So guys, let's not be jokers. People are dying in this country. They're dying. People don't even know where they're going to get the next meal. Those are the issues we should be talking about. You know, the president is on record as having said, that in 5 years, given another mandate, he's going to double the GDP. You are aware of that? Guys, one of the things we should have done is to push back to say, Mr. President, how are you going to do that? Do you know what it takes to double an economy in 5 years? Your economy has to grow at the rate of not less than 15% per annum. No country in the world grows at the rate of 15%. This country has never registered an economic growth of more than 10%. Now, even if you double your GDP, it still won't register. It will still not take you to the colonial period. It won't. You know why? Your population is increasing. When you reach, assuming you do, assuming you do, that if that is even possible, assuming you do, by 2030, what? 2031, assuming you do, your population will have increased to nearly 30 million. Guys, these are the serious issues we should be talking about, not delimitation, not this kind of rubbish that we're talking about. These are the real issues of bread and butter. So, my point, Mr. Moderator, listen, we shouldn't be having any discussion about the Constitution, none whatsoever. What we should be talking about is how do we make sure that we fully implement what the Constitution says. In any case, we know what the Constitution provides. To what extent are people respecting the Constitution? To what extent? None. That's what we should be talking about. Okay? Here we have found ourselves in this crazy situation where we are fighting over a corpse. I mean, how is that possible? How? Those are the issues we should be addressing. We just become jokers. Now you're talking about the limitation, increasing the numbers and so forth. Guys, we are wasting time. We should focus on the issues of our survival as a country. This country is broke. This country is in trouble. Those are the issues. And for you younger ones, you should even be more worried. There is no reason to have a smile on your faces. None. We should have a sense of collective disappointment with ourselves because we have squandered the opportunities in the last 60 years. So, to answer the question, you don't even need Article 79. We shouldn't even be talking about that. We shouldn't even be talking about Bill 7. Let's focus on the issues of bread and butter.
Thanks very much. There are two other questions probably Landilani or Linda could take each. The first one from Isaac was whether we should throw everything away or we can rehabilitate some of the proposals. And then the other one from Tembo, whether there are any good provisions in the bill. Yeah, so can start with Landilani. Take one of those and then Linda will take the other.
Okay, thank you so much, moderator. I'll start with the issue of whether there are positive provisions in the draft bill. And this is what I would like to say. I'll start from a historical perspective and say that what the bill, almost in its objective and in its spirit, tries to achieve a number of things that the Zambian people have said, but in trying to achieve it, there is a level of misgiving in the methodology. So there are two things in constitution making. There is an objective and then there's a method in which you actually actualize it. I think that the vision in the bill, to me, speaks to what has been said by the Zambian people from a historical perspective. But the way it is being achieved has been interfered with the political considerations. When you look at the actual nitty-gritties of the bill, there are so many things that take away from what can be achieved. And so, whereas you can say on the one hand that we have always talked about mixed member proportional representation, we've always talked about reducing the number of by-elections. In spirit, that is what we want as the Zambian people. But what we see in the bill is that it is not what we want to achieve based on the drafting of the bill. And that speaks to a very core issue about constitution making, which is about consultation and the technicalities of it, right? There is always, there's this saying that the devil is always in the detail. You can say a lot of things about a lot of things, but the devil is always in the detail. The devil is in the detail about how do we achieve some of the clauses that are in the draft bill. And if we miss that position, then we've missed what we're trying to achieve. To me, we should focus on the devil in the detail of the substance of the provision, right? We can be very grandstanding in terms of what we say the bill says and what it doesn't. But again, the devil is in the detail, and that speaks to the core that I think every Zambian should. How much have you studied the provision as an individual and as a citizen to make an informed position? Because for you to have an informed position, you must read that particular provision.
Thank you very much. Selinda?
Thank you, Dr. Kaba. Are there any good provisions in the bill? I always say, and it's the same thing with Bill 10, you'll never get a government that puts in place proposals that all look dangerous, if you like. They'll always throw in something that is innocuous, something that is not just outrightly harmful. So, for example, in Bill 7, we have now a proposal to define what it means to be a child, as there's been various pieces of legislation that are conflicting each other over that issue. And so it seeks to clarify that issue. It also talks about determining when a presidential petition should be heard and determined following the fiasco we had in 2016. So I think a lot of these issues could have been resolved through interpretation, and in fact, the issue of when a presidential petition should be heard and determined has already been determined by the Constitutional Court. So what value is adding that going to do for anybody? The majority of the clauses in Bill 10 are about electoral reform, and that electoral reform seeks to enhance the advantage of the incumbent to win the next election. So, I mean, that is the real problem that we're facing here. So, no, Mr. Mwanza, we cannot salvage Bill 7. There's nothing in there that is of value to the Zambian people.
Thanks very much. Thank you. So now I'll take a set of 5 questions from the audience here, and then I'll get back to the speakers to respond. So we start from the back. So, yeah, the gentleman over there. Yes, so we'll start from, and then we'll move this way. So keep your questions short so that we accommodate as many people as possible.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Joseph Shivanga, member of Central Committee of the Socialist Party. But however, I come here on my national capacity because I followed very keenly in terms of what is happening and how that the UPNP, for whatever reason, probably based on themselves, want to force the constitution of the people of Zambia. When I was born, my parents told me that they came from Eastern Province. That's both my father and my mother. And if I need to trace the roots of my parents, I must be on board the bus that's going, or at least moving towards Eastern Province. If by any circumstance I find myself in a bus that's heading north or west or south, certainly I'm not going to Eastern Province. However, if for whatever reason the driver feels another shortcut, therefore I must be able to benchmark. My point being, us discussing and sitting here looking at Bill 7 is utter waste of time. The process of enacting or changing the constitution has not been followed. I want to quote the words of late David Patrick Mwanawasa that he used when he instituted the economic endowment. said, and I quote, "None of us is wiser than all of us," meaning that by now, 22 million Zambians must be wiser enough to be able to enact.
Thank you. Do you have a question?
My question?
Yes.
I'm not sure I've been pushed, and I thought that we have a lot of time to discuss.
So we want to accommodate as many speakers as possible. So if you could go straight to your point, and then others also would want to address the panelists.
My point would be in a comment. I want to say that what President Akainde has suggested in guiding his Minister of Justice, to be fair, my submission is that please drop the Bill 7. We don't need it. We withdraw it completely. I don't even see the need for us discussing it. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much. So there's a hand over there. The gentleman.
So my question, for my analysis, I think the issue is on the legitimacy of the same yourself. And my question is, looking at the government election and the constitution, and the way to say some of the members of the constitution, we have the CRC, even the Unitarian Party, even the CA, also intercede. So looking at both. So now my question to the parliament is, which of the methods of constitution making would ensure the legitimacy that we are talking about? What we are looking at the citizen. So which among the process of adopting the constitution could help in bring about the legitimacy that we want as the people? So that's my question. Thank you.
Thanks, Maxwell.
There's the third one here.
Good afternoon. My question is directed to the last president, Mr. Zulu. So, assuming, in light of the deferment by the president of the bill to a more broader consultation, assuming they don't drop the bill in its entirety, what steps has NAS taken to ensure that the entities that will be part and parcel of that consultation process are enlightened? Some of us are privileged to understand the language that is being spoken. Are there any steps that NAS can take to send the same message that has been delivered here to entities that will take part in that consultative process as is mandated under Section 4A of the last Act?
Thanks, Gift.
Just by way of a side comment to state that I think we need more Zambians that are passionate and as patriotic about this country as is. I think we live in a much more better place. We have people that love this country as much as Gift and Sangwa does. Thank you.
Thanks very much. So come here, the lady here.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. My name is Esna Lugo. I am a freelance journalist and I am a concerned citizen. State Council, you say that we have wasted 6 years, and the reason we have a parliament is because our former colonizers have a parliament, and that's why we're discussing Bill 7 here today. And like if I properly say that we have wasted the 6 years, and it looks to me like the freedom fighters, quote unquote, I'm saying that because the colonizers are still in the system. Freedom fighters didn't necessarily do research to see what to set out a proper vision for what they wanted the country to look like, and that's why it seems difficult for us to stand on our feet. That's why we still have foreign powers controlling things. That's why our education system still teaches us to want to work for other people as opposed to industrialization. Now, we are here. We are in a mess, as you put it. We can't go back to being former colonizers and then starting afresh. What do we do from here going forward? That's my question to you. And Madam Linda Kasonde, you've mentioned gender inclusion, and it is true. One thing I've noticed though about the fight for gender equality is that women don't want to be at par with where things are. We're in a patriarchy. Be where you want to be, and that is not the vibe that we're seeing. Maybe in the beginning, when the vibe for gender equality started, that's how it was, but that's not how it is today. So how do we ensure that even as we're going into the elections 2026, women complain about violence? No, I can't participate because the men violence. No, I can't participate because the men have the money, I don't have the money. The men in the political party are understanding and not supporting me. But then that means that they want the patriarchy to bow to the needs of the woman and say, oh no, you can now participate. There's no red carpet that is going to be spread for anybody to participate anywhere. Women have to stand up. So is there anything that can be done to ensure that instead of begging for opportunities or a seat at the table, as people mostly put it, you get yourself a seat at that table and start demanding and finding yourself in a position where you need to be as women and, you know, have even 50-50 representation without having to fight for saying, you know, bring the bar down and then let the women also be included. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll get the last question and then I'll get the panelists to respond. I'll still come back to the audience.
Good morning. Yes, he wants to run president.
If you could tell us your name.
My name is Jay Malengo. I'm a private citizen. My question is very simple. The feedback seems to be that we don't need Bill 10. We know that civil society met the president last week. We know that there's been wide consultation. We've heard people from the church and everybody else. What's the state saying on the matter now? Are they proceeding with it despite the pushback, or are they going to drop it? Thank you.
Thanks very much. So over to the panelists. This time I start with Madam Nata Sande. So if you may keep your responses short so that we get more questions from the audience. Thank you.
I'll respond to Ms. Esna Zulu's question about Lungu. Okay, sorry. About how women can get a seat at the table. I think first and foremost, we're socialized to believe that men can make decisions on behalf of women. And I think the first port of call is for women to realize that it's important for them to make decisions for themselves, for the reasons I highlighted earlier, because the lived experiences of men are very different and varied from those of women. Women's experiences are also varied, and it's not enough to just have one woman representing everybody. Once you see the need, and it's not just a nice to have, it's an actual need for women to be at the decision-making table. Just like the story I gave about the warring people fighting over a dry river. If you see the need and know that you have something to contribute to resolve the issues that women are facing, and not just women, it's not just about women's issues. Women also have a different perspective on other issues that affect everyone more broadly. But it's a need, it's not a nice to have. So I think once we accept that, we'll change our mindset around whether or not we should put ourselves forward and have a seat at the table.
Thank you. Lendelani, then we'll come to the President. Your short comment?
I think my very short comment is in the overall questions that have been asked as to whether we actually need Bill 7 or we don't. And I think that I'll throw back the question back to the audience. Do we need constitutional reforms or do we not? Can we have a perfect constitution or can we not? I think that there is an important need to reform what we have in the current constitution in 2016. We do need constitutional reform. Do we need it in the manner that has been presented by the government? Yes or no? In my opinion, I think that the manner in which the government has presented it is not in the way that we need constitutional reform. I think the wider question that we do need to ask ourselves is, Do we need constitutional reform? In my opinion, yes, we do. What are the areas? There are many. Some of them addressed in the current Bill 7 in a way that is to a large extent undesirable, but we do need constitutional reform. That should not be a mistake that we can make. We need constitutional reform, we need constitutional implementation, but we also need to have a very honest dialogue about how we achieve it. So,
thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thanks very much. Mr. President, the question to you is, suppose the bill is not dropped completely, what would LAS do?
Thank you, and I think that question speaks to what must the consultations that have necessitated the deferment of Bill 7 of 2025 look like. Where we sit now, I have taken that government is saying, okay, we have had so much apprehension about the process that we have commenced. We hear you, civil society, we hear you, citizens, about why you are concerned with the current process in terms of process as well as content. Now, tell us, what must we do with this bill and going forward? One of the answers could be, from the consultations and the citizens' reaction, we want to believe and persuade government that we must not even proceed with this process. That's one result. Another result could be citizens will tell government and say, no, the process can be improved in this way. How? Let us do one or two things and include more stakeholders to this process. Another third result could be that citizens and stakeholders will say the content can also be improved in this way, either in terms of what is proposed to resolve for by-elections, maybe not to eliminate citizens from that participation, but maybe there's another methodology to address the challenge, or from your 13, there are additional areas that could be added to address the problem. Now, where we are is to have those conversations, and I think that's why this public forum is important. What must we be telling government in these consultations? Is it no, yes, but, or no to this, but to that? And as LAS, we are duty-bound to provide a platform so that we come with a result that we can tell government about the way forward. It would be unfair for us to start preparing how to block the next way forward if government doesn't stop before giving citizens an opportunity to really interrogate whether that process should be terminated entirely or should be altered going forward. So I think we are now focusing on the consultations and what they must result in terms of the current process. I thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr. President. State Council, your question is, what do we do going forward since we have wasted 60 years? Thank you.
Yeah. Now, before I come, Dr. Kab, indulge me for a moment to, yeah. Dr. Banda was one of my students. I think he must have missed one of my lectures. I can't remember how good your attendance was. Here is my take. Guys, we don't need reform of the Constitution. We don't. There are priorities. There are bigger challenges. This is a luxury. Okay? First, no constitution in the world is perfect. You can never have a perfect constitution. And that is why the Constitution itself says, if there is a problem, you go to the Constitutional Court and the Constitutional Court will guide. Okay? So by that definition, by that provision, there is an acknowledgement that the Constitution is imperfect. Okay? Because if it was perfect, there would have been no need for the Constitutional Court. Okay, so there is already an inbuilt mechanism to sort out its imperfections. For example, when we went to do with the issue of the 2016 election, okay, we went to court, and the court finally guided to say, well, you know what, a petition must be concluded within 14 days. We were guided, and later on the Chief Justice issued a statutory instrument that now addresses how election petition ought to be conducted. That is how you build on the law. How many times have seen your own foundation of your homes looked at every year? Who looks at the foundation of his house every year? Who does? Huh? Tell me. That is what the Constitution is. You only look at the Constitution when you see cracks. Isn't that what we do? Our homes, when we see that walls are cracking, that's when we call people to say, can you shore up the foundation, isn't it? So, the same with the Constitution. You must be able to point to some cracks, some problems which threaten the very existence of the country. Okay? Just like a foundation for your house. When you see cracks, you know that the entire superstructure, that whatever is on top, what do? Is in danger. Okay? That's when you bring in people. You don't do that every year. You don't. Every 5 years, we don't. So why should we be doing that to the Constitution? Okay? So no Constitution is ever perfect, and I'm sorry I disagree with Dr. Banda here. We do not need it. Okay? Also remember, historically, previous presidents have had reasons. Okay? It's a long history, starting way back in 1991. Dr. Banda, you should know this. There's been a historical justification. That chapter closed in 2016. That chapter closed. We went to a referendum. We decided to say we will bring in a new constitution in 2 phases. The first one to deal with provisions that did not require a referendum, and the other one required a referendum. The other one passed. It was a compromise between UPND and PF. They framed the Constitution as they did. When we took it to a referendum for the Bill of Rights, that referendum failed to pass. That too was people's choice that we must respect. That chapter is over. This government has no reason to start tinkering at the Constitution. Okay? So that is my point. You do not need. We have to give it time. How will it work? Like I've said, there are so many provisions that have not yet been actuated. Okay? So in fact, we have to carry out civic education. How many of our people anyway even know the Constitution? Okay? Now, if you change it every day, where will the people find the time? Why should I even read it if I know that it will be changed next year? Huh? Who's going to read it? I won't read it because I'm waiting for the change. Right now, people have stopped reading. They're simply waiting whether Bill 7 will go through or not so that they can read it. No, we put a stop to that and we move on. Okay? We don't need it. Somebody talked about deferment. Listen, deferment is not a withdrawal. Okay? When you look at Standing Order 121 and 122, it clearly states that a bill that has been deferred, it can be brought back within 6 months. Only after 6 months, it is deemed to have been withdrawn. So between now and the 6th month, by December, they can bring it back. Okay, that is the position. So my position is that you don't need it. You don't need it. And there's been this notion of saying, oh, non-contentious issues. Who said that? What standard, what test did you use to determine whether something is non-contentious or not contentious? Who made such a determination? What formula did the people use to arrive at those provisions? Okay? Now, this is a very important question that you've posed. What do we do going forward? You are right. It's easy to criticize. Okay? It's easy to point out about all these things. The question is, what do we need to do? Right? The first stop, the beginning, we need a collective acknowledgement that Zambia is in trouble. Okay? each and every one of us. We're not pointing fingers, right? Just acknowledge the fact that we've messed up. Now, we don't have to blame the colonialist 60 years after independence. Okay, we don't. We take full responsibility. Do you know what independence means? Independence means you are responsible for your own destiny. Nobody will bail you out to get into trouble. Okay? So we cried for independence in 1964. What we are saying is that we are on our own, and we have screwed up on our own collectively over the last 60 years. There is a saying, if you didn't cause it, you can't control it, you can't cure it. We Zambians cause this mess we are in. Therefore, only we can control it and can cure it. But we begin by acknowledging we are in trouble as a country. Okay? Then we should have a discussion, how do we get out of it? You cannot blame the colonialists for the theft of public resources to the point whereby you are even stealing ARVs. Who does that? Who does that? That's a sickness, it's a disease.
Thank you, State Council. So I get another 5 questions. So I start with Mark, and then we'll come here, we'll follow the same order all the way to the back. So Mark, yeah, is right next to you there. And then we'll come here, and then we'll go all the way to the back. So you want to speak from here? Oh, okay, but keep your intervention short.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kaba. I hope that Senior State Council Sangwa will also not say I missed one of his classes, because part of what I will use are his notes. Yes.
The revised one.
First of all, I want to commend the team for their submission. Divergent views are healthy in any democracy. And in a democracy, we have to agree to disagree. When they disagree with us, they should also accept when we disagree with them. I find it a bit weird when we have a lawyer attacking provisions that are statute bound. What am I talking about? Article 58, sub-article 5 of the Constitution of Zambia provides, and I read, the Electoral Commission shall at intervals of not more than 10 years review the names and boundaries of constituencies and wards. End of quote. I wish to submit on this score that the idea to propose in the bill to change the complexion and structure of the constituency is not a suggestion. It is a constitutional provision. I want further to mention that, having said that, one of the key issues that I learned from Senior State Council Sangwa, who was also one of the lead lawyers in the case that Madam Linda Kasonde referred to. I was in the chamber with him. I was actually filing in for them. One of the key issues that he normally talked about was that you have to come up with a constitution that stands the test of time. Doc, I'm sure you remember, that's part of his words. Secondly, there are different approaches to making the constitution. Constituent Assembly, amendments are one of them. And never in his lecture did he ever tell us that amending a constitution is not a priority. But that, I'm coming. But no, I'm making a comment. So it's a conversation, it's dialogue. So dialogue is not about questions only, it's about comments also. So my submission is that, unless you want to come and edit my speech, allow me to speak, because that's what democracy entails. Okay. So that's part of the problem that we have with Dr. Kaba. So The other point that I want to bring out is that one of the attributes of a good legal system is that laws must change according to the changing society. And the people themselves have the power to change the constitution. Now, Article 61 of the Constitution provides that legislative powers are derived from the people. But the next article, 62, they vest those powers in Parliament. Through their submissions, none of them has told me which clause in the Constitution has been breached insofar as this proposed bill is concerned. I think I'll end here for now. So I'd want to hear the reaction.
Thanks, Mark. Microphone, the next gentleman in black here.
Dr. Cobb. Dr. Cobb. Dr. Cobb.
Morning, thank you.
Dr. Cobb. Dr. Cobb.
Oh, yes.
Can you indulge me?
No, sir. Can I?
Okay, just a minute.
Can I just address this issue to do with 58?
No, sir.
My memory is failing me.
I propose I get the 5 questions and then I'll remind you.
I hope you remind me.
Yes, sure.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. No, you can get the microphone from there.
Let me have this privilege.
No, you can, yeah.
Okay, seems like it's enough time. So I thought I should come through, maybe we can have a conversation today. So one of the things that is always raised by us, also Chapter 1 Foundation, is the lack of consultation on the part of government. But I would love a situation where we get submissions on the positions LAS has taken, whether you submitted the same to your members and you got consultation. Same with Chapter 1 Foundation, whether you've been doing consultation, because you have to have a moral standing for you to make suppositions, positions. When you say government is not consulting, show us how you've consulted to reach where you are today. Secondly, on the, like my boss Mark mentioned, the government has followed the law. Article 79 is very clear who's supposed to enact the laws, which is the parliament. I'm not sure why in Zambia one of the laws should be enacted in cathedrals and in NGO boardrooms. Those are supposed to be enacted in parliament. My last point is that Law Association of Zambia is an association, it's a part. I'm an engineer, we also have Engineering Institute of Zambia, we have accountants association, we've got architects, we've got so many professions. I think it's if you don't have time for submissions, then why are we here? No, I'm making, just like Mark, I'm making submission because we haven't had a chance to debate with these people. It's only we could be allowed maybe to go on one platform one day by LAS or Chapter 1 Foundation. Then we can give the audience a more balanced discussion. Otherwise, it's just an onslaught of one opinion, which is not even for everybody.
Thank you very much. So the next one is Mr. Charlie in the middle there.
Thank you very much, Dr. Brian. My name is Clement. I'm from the Center for Young Leaders in Africa, SNIDA. I thought we should be able to make a comment on some of these provisions, specifically because the consortium of civil societies representing young people, the women and persons with disabilities did sit in Kafue to be able to deliberate on the issue of having these marginalized groupings part of the parliament being represented in short. What came out in that process was that these groupings did propose a mixed member electoral system. What the government has done, they've come up with a whole different system that is tokenism in nature, a mixed member proportional system that awards seats to parties that are already big in nature. The mixed member electoral system proposes that we'll have a parallel electoral system that will bring in new 60 members of parliament picked from these groupings who shall compete for these seats. No one wants a seat on a free table. No one wants a seat on a silver platter. These marginalized groupings want to actively participate in the electoral process, but it should be a system that will be able to give credibility and also make them feel proud that they actually came into the house by way of a vote. I wish those that are in support of this provision would tell us who is it that this position is being reserved for, because I hope they feel that we have enough civil servants that have 10 years experience. I thought I should add that to say this. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Patricio Chadi. I'm a constitutional lawyer. More of a comment. Article 45, 2, C and T both talk about the electoral system of Zambia should be transparent. They also talk about the fact that the electoral process should be simple, it should be practical in terms of tabulation. Now, when you look at the proposed proportional representation, how is that simple? How is that practical in terms of tabulation? Because proportional representation is done in South Africa is very mathematical. In this country, you can't agree when 14 days is 14 days. In this country, you can't agree when 14 hours comes. How are we going to agree? Bill 7 proposes to add the words and determine. You realize that in the 1996 Constitution, it says that the court shall hear and determine the matter. Shall hear and determine the matter. In the 2016, the word determine was left out. It just says the court shall hear. So hence we had that famous 14 days. It has rightly said, it has not been interpreted. There is no need for it to be in Bill 7. And I wonder, as a person that has challenged the dismissal of 3 court judges, I'm the one arguing that matter. I'm thinking, is government agreeing that the dismissal of the 3 court judges then was not necessary by bringing that in Bill 7? There is an issue about lacuna that when a candidate files in and resigns, then the election is going to be postponed. So Bill 7 tries to cure that by bringing the issue that was discussed at a political party, bringing those issues of curing it. Now, like others have said, there is no need to load the Constitution. Article 8 talks about the values of the Constitution. Article 9 says, when you are interpreting the Constitution, bear in mind those values. What are some of the values? Democracy is one of them. Are you going to tell me that the Constitutional Court will agree that candidates can file a nomination and resign 100 times, and 100 times the election will be postponed? Is that democracy? It won't be democracy. So you leave some of these things to the court to interpret as opposed to having them in the Constitution. The issue of replacing vacant MPs, Bill 7 tries to say a political party that had the MP that has left Parliament, they will nominate a person without a by-election. We cannot agree. Let's give an example of the current Chabinga versus Mausa BF. So if Chabinga decides to expel all the PF MPs, it means that Chabinga has to replace them with the Republicans. That's what it means. Because Article 72E says that one of the ways a person can cease to be a member of Parliament is when they're expelled. So Chabinga cannot get expelled. And then they are going to have UPA that's on the PF ticket. So these are things that you must think about. Just lastly, that's what I agree with Mr. Sangwa, that there are so many provisions that have not been implemented. Part 19 is one of them. It talks about land and environment. It has not been implemented. The Constitution says you cannot give land on a river frontage. Not everyone is getting river frontage. But the Constitution doesn't agree with that. Okay? We should implement some of these things. The Constitution says a person who pollutes the river or the environment must pay for it. We saw Zaf owning land in Kafiri. Who paid for that Zaf in top? Who paid for the land? Because the Constitution itself, in Article 253, says that you pay Okay? It also says that people have access to environmental information. Can I walk into Zambia today and tell Augustus for information who polluted the river? Are you going to give me? Don't give me. Lastly, state audit is one of the things that have not been implemented. Okay? They also said we need a state audit commission that should appoint the Auditor General. Today we are in court about the Auditor General's qualification. So if we have this commission, there will be no problem. So let's implement some of these things that are there. Lastly, local government. It says that Article 152 of Article 2 says that the national government cannot interfere in the duties of the local authority. But today, we have a minister suspending Chokwe Council, a minister suspending African District Council. The Constitution in Article 152 does not give the minister powers to suspend the council. The minister is appointed, the council is elected. Okay, I know that in 2019 they amended the whole government act and still put back this provision. But it's legal, it's a constitution. Those are some of the things we should be discussing. I thank you.
Then I'll come to the panelists to respond. So, okay, got it.
Okay, good afternoon everyone. My name is Nsekelo Kamfa. I'm a third year law student at the University of Zambia and also the Vice President of the Legal Scholars Guild of Zambia. So, mine is more or less a question and a comment. So, just a brief comment. I hope next time when we organize such events, we should ensure, first thank you organizers for organizing this event. Let's ensure when we organize such events, we have a sign language interpreter around. So for those that are watching online who are hearing impairments, they are also able to follow through. And also those who will come to us with that. So that's a brief comment. So my question, which is also something as a comment, is that as we are looking at these constitutional amendments and the like, I call on the civil societies that are here and other stakeholders. Let us involve students in this process. We, representing many young people, are very cardinal in this process. And I feel when it comes to this process, many people, there's consultation with civil society, political parties, with church organizations, but there isn't really much consultation with students. There are many students that are here, that are seated. Listen, many law students for that matter, but we haven't seen any engagement. So no, let's get students, what is their opinion on the matter? And I feel that, especially that now that this process has been deferred, needs to change. As students, even for those that are viewing, maybe if there's somebody from government that is watching, we need to be engaged as well. We need to be incorporated. We have students union, we have ZASU, we have the union for unionists, the union for zinkers. We need them engaged. We have the law associations in the respective schools. We have Unza Law, we have Unionist Law, we have so many law associations. They need to be engaged as well. We are a cardinal stakeholder. Yes, and then the question is yes, so the question to us is specifically how will us, as this process has been deferred, ensure that it works actively with law students, ensure that they're able to contribute effectively to the constitution process. I thank you.
Thanks very much. Get back to my panelists and come back for probably the final round of questions. So many of the interventions were actually submissions, so I think there were about 3 substantive questions. The first from Mark, I think the question directed to State Council Sangwa in relation to the clause on delimitation, that is a constitutional requirement delimited with 10 years, and also that the Constitution vests a state authority in Parliament. And then the question to civil society, probably that would be the best, to show how you were consultative yourselves in taking the position you have taken on the constitution making. And then the question from, I believe that is Oliver, to our president here, why why didn't you balance the panel? Because according to him, everyone is on the panel is speaking against the bill. So why did you bring on board those who support the bill so that you get their perspectives also? And also, I think the last one from Lusekelo to the President is, how are you going to incorporate students in your activities on this bill going forward? Thank you. So if we may start with Linda, then the President, then last State Council.
Just a couple of points. Somebody questioned the legitimacy of civil society's positions on this constitutional reform process and whether or not, in fact, they have conducted any consultations. I'm very much aware of several civil society organizations that are working together to go around the country, not just in Lusaka, asking people's views in the provinces as to what they would like to see in the Constitution. So very much so, people are being consulted. So that's that point. And then on the delimitation, I believe the constitutional provisions actually refer to reviewing. Now, if you look at the word review in its simplest form, if you look in the dictionary, it means to consider, and it doesn't mean that it's a mandatory provision that delimitation must happen every 10 years. You simply, you do your consultations, you review the constituencies as in their current form, and you decide whether in fact there is need, and there are many considerations that you take into place, including costs of increasing constituencies, and certainly increasing them by 60%, if not more. It doesn't sound justifiable at all. And I think State Council has mentioned on many occasions that in the US, which is a population of about 340 million people, there are only 585 constituencies. So who are we to have 200 and, what is it, 60-something, 56 new constituencies to cater for a population of 20 million? It just doesn't make sense. And also, with regards to the delimitation, there's a misconception that MPs are supposed to do service delivery. That is the role of local authorities, not MPs. So if in fact the population has grown to the size at which the local authority can no longer cater for that population, then the solution is simply to increase the capacity of the local authority to handle the area. So I'll just stop there, but those are the considerations. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Mr. President.
Thank you so much. Maybe let me begin with an assurance that LAS is not here to perpetuate only one side of the argument. In fact, this public forum, as I indicated, is a consultative process for purposes of informing what must we be telling government insofar as the process is concerned, insofar as the bill is concerned, and insofar as the content is concerned. And if I were to judge how the President has reacted, it would appear that he has found merit in the various arguments that have been made by stakeholders about the current process. So for UPND, our media team that is here, and the consultant, I think let's latch on this and take it as an opportunity to do things even better. If we fall in the era of only defending that which the President has said, maybe there's a point with what you are suggesting, we will not make meaningful progress as a nation. So UPND team and all other political parties must actually welcome this deferment, because it enables us to restart or reset the process of constitutional reform. If you will fall in the era of only defense of what is already in Bill 7 of 2025, I think you will not help the president very much, because he has heard what others have said and he agrees that maybe there can be some improvements. So why are you stressing yourself defending things? So let's work together and help the country to go forward. And insofar as the balancing of the panel is concerned, I want to assure you that, in fact, even beginning with Mark, who is in here, an invitation was extended to him if he wanted to be here. An extension of, to be part of the panel was made to the Minister of Justice, to the Minister of Information. We do not have any ulterior motive as Lars to advance one cause over the other. What we want is a genuine national consultation, so that the product or the fruits of this consultation will make our country better. If indeed we approach it in a non-partisan way, I think the reform process will produce much more. But I was tempted to also weigh in on the argument of delimitation. I think that is actually a very weak argument to make for advancing a reform process. I must begin by saying that there is nothing in the Constitution that mandates that there must be a constitutional review on the basis of delimitation every 10 years. Let me make a legal argument and why I say so. Under Article 58, cited by Mr. Max Moore, the number of constituencies is not regulated by 58.5 that is cited. According to Article 58 of the Constitution, it says, and it's 58.2, it said, the number of constituencies shall be equal to the number of seats of elected members in the National Assembly. There is no requirement to change this number. Insofar as delimitation is concerned, 58.5 says as follows. The Electoral Commission shall, at intervals of not more than 10 years, review the names and boundaries of constituencies and wards. This is what you must do, and it doesn't require you to change the Constitution or to increase the number. So what is delimitation according to Article 58.5? Where I stay, which is State Lodge, has always been Chongwe constituency, because in the original delimitation and naming and size of Chongwe constituency, it was expensive to include some of the parts which are now Chelston. Because people have settled in State Lodge and Chelston, some of which was ordinarily Chongwe, it is impossible to correctly call Chongwe constituency to be that area which also covers Chelston and State Lodge. So the Constitution expects that the boundary of Chongwe must be moved, and the name of this constituency to cover State Lodge must be delimited and exclude some portions which, strictly speaking, maybe should be Lusaka Central or Munali constituency. Once we do this every 10 years, we have satisfied the requirement of the Constitution. It is a fallacy to suggest that we are mandated to increase the constituencies every 10 years as a requirement in the Constitution. Not at all. But if our needs do show that we need that, nothing stops us from doing so. So I think it's a weak argument, and it makes 7 look very bad to use weak arguments to advance it. especially that some of the things it is hoping to, address, indeed, as Doc Landilani has said, have always been of concern to citizens. How do we get rid of by-elections?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So, State Council, question from Mark, I think centering on two provisions, delimitation every 10 years and vesting legislative power in Parliament. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. Actually, I don't even remember him being in my class. Him, Mark.
Oh, Mark. He was.
He was?
Yes.
Okay. His age. I can take advantage of age. Okay. No, I think in my keynote address, I think I pointed out what is bad or wrong with Bill 7. Okay? It's there. I can give you my paper if you are interested. I have a personal plea. Guys, when we meet in a gathering like this, I think it is inappropriate to identify ourselves as UPND, Socialist Party. We are here as Zambians. Okay? I think it is wrong. It is inappropriate. We are here to discuss what is in the interest of the Republic. I have lived long enough. I've seen people that were once in power thrown the other side. Okay? Power is transient. It's never permanent. Okay? So you should always remember, you see, power is public trust, and the people can withdraw that privilege. So when we talk, we should talk in a non-partisan way. It is important. You see, there is strength when the country comes together. We are first and foremost Zambians before we can identify ourselves whether PF, UPND, or Socialist Party. We are first and foremost Zambians. I think when we come together like this, this is the posture. We should also remember that we have children. When we fight for these things, we fight, if not for ourselves, let's fight for our children. Okay? I think it is very important because the country is so polarized. It's terrible. It's terrible. It's so bad. And that is the poison we are drinking. Now, for some reason, we think we won't get sick by drinking that poison. We will. Okay? Now, coming to Article 79, I think my history is very clear on these constitutional issues. You see, the beauty of the Constitution as amended in 2016 is that not only does it vest power in the various state organs, it reminds the state organs that this power you have is not yours, it's for the people. You have to use it in a manner that benefits the people. So, when you have a bill, there's a test. Yes, Mr. Smue, yes, you have powers under Article 79, but you don't have a blank check. It's not a blank check. So when you decide to say you have to amend the Constitution, we now have national values and principles. They should guide you. Okay? Even when the executive powers of the Republic are conferred in the President, they are not his powers. They are people's powers. When he is, by the way, legislation is initiated by the President. So before he releases the bill, he has to ask himself, how does this benefit my people? Right? He should be able to make a case. And there is no case that has been made in relation to Bill 7 as to how it benefits the people. It doesn't. Okay? So there are safeguards. Even if you have power, you don't have a blank check. You have to satisfy those standards. Okay? Let me conclude also on, yes, laws must be changed, but there has to be a case. You don't fix something that is not broken. Okay? We fix things because there is a problem. And one of the issues that you should also be mindful I'm sure Dr. Banda, Dr. Kaba know this. Timing in constitutional changes is important. How do you begin to change the constitution a year before the election? How did you do that? Where were you all along? Why wasn't this the first order of business when you got elected? Why didn't you do it? If I tell it's genuine and it has nothing to do with the election, why do you have to wait a year before? No, maybe we're talking about months now, right? Yeah, so that is where, even if the intention is good, timing is very important. Okay, right now this particular bill is tainted. It is tainted. Now, guys, there is a reason. If you go back to the limitation provisions in the Constitution, there is a long history, starting way back to the 1964 Constitution. The overriding consideration is the national quota. National quota. Can somebody tell me the rationale for a member of parliament for Kanyama to be responsible for 500,000 people and somebody in the northwestern province to be responsible for 25,000? Can somebody give me any rational explanation for that? There's a problem. Okay, now the reason you have delimitation every 10 years is very simple. Do you know that we have the highest population growth in the world? In the region? Our population growth is crazy. We're looking at, if you look at the draft report, it is talking about nearly, I think, 3 to 4%. We are breeding, so it is bad. Okay, that is why you have to revise the boundaries every 10 years, because every 10 years the population grows. Now, if the population is flat, okay, most of the countries in the sub-region, their population growth is under 2%. We have one of the highest population growth. So that is why I was to answer your question, we have to make sacrifices, all of us, to pull out Zambia out of the mess it is in. So that is why there is a requirement. So delimitation, guys, get it. It has nothing to do with creation of new boundary constituencies. It has nothing to do with that. It is about, it's not about creating new constituencies. It is about playing around with the boundaries. Where the population has grown, you shift you can't shift people, right? But you can shift the boundary. Yes. There's this myth to say because we are more, we should create more. No, it doesn't. Okay? For example, some constituencies should not exist, should not have been created in the first place. Okay? And to echo my colleagues, guys, it's a myth, that lie to say, no, we need more constituencies for development. Guys, that's a lie. Okay? MPs have nothing to do with the development. Development at the local level is the responsibility of local authorities. You look at the back of the Constitution, you will see the list of functions. There are functions dedicated to the national government, then there are shared function between the national government and the provincial government. Then there are functions that are exclusive to the local authorities. And that development, I can't just understand it, why people peddle such kind of lies. It's just strange. Now, at the local level, it is the local authorities. Finished. They plan. That is why local authorities are divided into wards. Okay, these are the people who know the challenges. This is how the idea of devolution comes from. You can't control everything from Lusaka. Okay, that is why, for example, you gave fire tender to Siavonga. How much was that? That fire tender was about $1 million, right? Now, Siavonga's never had the fire, but you give them a fire tender. Do you know what they were using the fire tender for? Transport. Okay, they were transporting people and it overturned $1 million gone. But if you had asked Siavonga District Council, they would have told you to say, no, we need, just give us the money. Out of 1 million, we'll buy 20 bakis. Okay? So the people at the local level know their needs, not Lusaka. Okay, so delimitation, guys, get it. Delimitation has nothing to do with creating new constituency, but it has everything to do with alteration of boundaries. Now, this is necessary in our country because of the high population growth. There is also high movement of people. For example, if you are aware, Kalumbila, so many people have moved into Kalumbila. And certain areas, you have a population growth of about 6%, which is very high, but the average is about 3%. So you have to take into account, this is the purpose of the delimitation exercise. It has nothing to do with creating new constituencies.
Thank you very much, State Council. Thanks. So I'll get the last.
My question wasn't answered.
The President answered it.
No.
Okay, we'll deal with that then. So I'll get the last 5 questions. We are only remaining with about 10 minutes. We're supposed to finish by 13 hours. So keep your questions straight to the point, no speeches, and I'll give the panelists about a minute each to react and give their closing remarks. So we start from the back, where you are, Henry, and then we'll go to the...
My question borders on the situation that we have witnessed, whereby ever since these proposed amendments were announced, we saw the Minister of Justice, Princess Kasune Zulu, go around the country in what was called getting consensus from different stakeholders. But on the other hand, we noticed that there's an outcry, or there's a rejection for such an action from civil society organizations and other stakeholders who are saying that bill or the whole process lacks the necessary consensus. So my question is, in your own words, or in your own view as an association with Zambia, what constitutes acceptable consensus, since there's a big disparity between what is being taken as consensus from the government and yourselves as Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I go to State Council Shonga, and then I'll come to
But women with their hands up, no one is pointing at them.
Can I yield to the lady next to me?
Thank you so much, State Council Shonga. I have a question to everyone seated on the panel. What are we doing to get everything that we are discussing here, or the views that we hold in relation to this Bill 7? What are we doing in bringing that information to the regular, ordinary Zambian to understand? What are we doing? And just a brief comment, I will not abuse my time. What I see most of the times is everyone in here is intelligent, everyone here is smart. We all understand what we are discussing. But as I was coming, because I was late, I was listening to Dr. Banda, and he said tokenism. And I said, what's that? We are not conscious of the fact that at the end of the day, government is selling. We are all salespeople here. Government is selling, you are selling this bill to the ordinary Zambian. We get lost in legal arguments, big words, and we forget that our actual target is the ordinary Zambian, the ones who actually vote at the end of the day. Let me just finish, Doctor. The ones that actually vote. What plans do you have to explain this bill to them, and how are you going to do it? Are we going to see a more proactive step to ensuring that the ordinary Zambian understands it? Otherwise, is at the end of the day, doctor, we are just going to move away from this meeting and it's going to turn into jokes or indala mashatokenism nashuma. Or it will just turn into jokes. Thank you.
Thank you, moderator. First, gratitude to all of those that spoke today. The views from the audience were also very helpful. I'll focus my comment on just one aspect. I shan't take long. Consensus building is the agenda I would like to push. The President has given us pause. I think it was the right thing to do because the temperatures were very high. You can't think when it's too hot. Temperatures will now come down. The question is, what do we do in this moment of pause? And my hope is that whatever is done leads to consensus building. I'm a scholar of constitutional law, but that's not the issue today. The issue is there must be consensus building for an enduring process. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think that my question goes straight to the panelists, especially the last president. This is not the first time, so when we are having a problem, when we have a bill. The 10 was thrown away, and today we have the 7. So, since this has a written bill, what have you done when the first bill, the 10, was thrown away? Have you engaged the government that came up with that bill and tried to educate them on how they are supposed to come up with the bill for people to appreciate it, and even for you who are us and our state council to appreciate it? Because this will be like a trend whereby when the government comes up with a bill, then it has to be done down without coming at the round table and explain to each other why this cannot pass.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So, anybody?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, maybe it's the next time we get to the last one.
Organizing this event. Like the lady said, we've been here before. So I have some questions from us. What are the weaknesses or the aspects that are in the constitutional making process that allow it to be easily reshaped by those in government? My second question is, moving forward, what measures can be taken to put in place to stop those in power from easily bending the constitution to their will? And how can we frame this process to focus on the pressing needs of the nation? Thank you.
So thanks very much. So Henry, you have the discretion to choose the last one to ask. I'll come back and we'll get to everyone. So, but make your comments short.
My comments are going to be very short. And one will be directed to State Council Sangwa, and the other one is a short comment on what the last president has mentioned. It is not true to argue that delimitation is only a movement of boundaries. Delimitation is the movement of boundaries and also creating of new boundaries. Hence, the Constitution talks about naming. I want that point to be clear. And there is a report by the Electoral Commission of Zambia that states that there is need to increase the number of constituencies. So if there is need to increase the number of constituencies, it follows naturally that the Constitution should be amended. Where the Constitution says you should have 150 members, it increases according to what you are advised by the technocrats. Which technocrats have done a research? Not even Laz has done that research, not even Mr. Sangwa has done that research, or any of the panelists there. Moving forward, Mr. Sangwa in his political speech has pledged. It is what it is. I have to protect my family. So Mr. Sangwa, State Council Sangwa, in his speech, he argued that U7 actually reaches at 90. My argument is that there is no bill that can reach a law. Scheme. He has also argued that he was also argued. So when you talk about moderator, you have to protect speakers in here. He has also argued that U7 does not protect the Constitution, but undermines the Constitution. Now, there is a proposal in U7 that says that instead of just hearing, you should also be determined. How is that going to be undermined? How is the Constitution going to be undermined if you just put determined? So, if it requires the court to hear, not only to hear, but also to determine, how is that undermining the Constitution? I think.
Thanks very much, Mr. Zana. The next one. So go straight to the point.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. My question goes to Council Sangwa, and my question is, I would like to understand what you are opposed to when it comes to Bill 7. Is it the process? Is it the content? Is it the timing? I ask that because as you've been engaging, I've noticed you seem to be opposing yourself, and let me explain what I mean by that. You said you are opposed to the whole process of Bill 7 and the reform and everything. Then later on you went on to justify the need for delimitation. So if you say we do away completely with Bill 7, what about the aspects that you are encouraging towards delimitation? And also I just want to applaud you. I am not done. Okay, thank you, Council. Thank you.
Okay, so the show of hands is okay, the last three, okay. The people go straight to the point.
Thank you very much. All protocols observed.
Thank you.
I'm speaking on behalf of the youth. What can I say? It's an observation. To say that to align the mayors to come to the MP's tenure of office, it means that they will enjoy unnecessary eternal tenure. Eternal tenure means they will stay there forever. So the youth that we have here, they will not chance to be MPs. Number two, I come from the world of finance. It's a strict analysis. I want to borrow what Dr. Balmer is saying. What if we come up with a bill, whether it becomes 7 or whatever bill, what are we going to do? I suggest that we do what Dr. Balmer said, to have an alternative position. In whatever is a better alternative position, not just to say we don't want it. There is no time that we should be naked. We put on the old, put off the old, put on the new. I don't want to be naked. I love you.
Yes, the gentleman.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. My name is Sangwa. I'm a senator of the Legal Scholars now in Zambia. Mine is a contribution and very brief. I think what we have had in the country is what I can term as a protracted constitutional making process. Because all the time, ever since we began this whole process, ever since 1972, we have always brought in proposed amendments and changes throughout. And just to categorize these things, Yes, I'm coming to that. I'm just laying a bit. These things, or the proposed amendments, always have to deal with things that will only benefit the politicians directly and not Zambians. We have not spoken about the importance of bringing in social as well as economic rights in the Constitution. All the time we always talk about things that have to do, parliament that, presidential term that, running mate, security of tenure for that. Yes, they're important. But let's also consider putting in things that will be beneficial to the Zambians directly, not only the politicians themselves. And in conclusion, I'm submitting to Mr. President that next time as you're going to organize this thing, try to also put in a very youthful voice to sit among us in panel, so that as they're going to be giving their submissions, the youths themselves at large will not feel left out. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much. Anyone watch it?
All right, thank you so much. My name is Chipanga John, a first-year student at the University of Zambia. Worried to hear that the people that were invited to be part of this gathering have not come, which is a very worrying sign. The Minister of Justice representative. Now my question goes to the last president. From your own observation of all the discussions that are going on here, what is your conclusion and what are you going to advise the government? Thank you.
Thanks very much. So I saw the last hand. Yeah, last hand over there.
Ladies first, hello everybody, for protocols observed. My name is Abdullah Napandre, and my question goes to you, the last president, and also the panelists. You have couched yourselves as protectors or guardians of the Constitution. And when asked how far or what would you do to protect the Constitution, you have said you will engage in conversation. Is that the full extent you are willing to go? How far are you willing to go as protectors or guardians of the Constitution? Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Wadi, a proud Zambian. My question is directed towards Mr. Sangwa and Madam Linda Kasuri. So, in the bill, the government intends to increase the number of nominated MPs from 8 to 8. But when you look at all the previous constitutional review commissions, have been against this proposal, and including the 2025 Mumomba Commission. So my question is, from where did the government take this proposal? Was it made in the cabinet room, or where did they take this proposal from? I seek the guidance from the panel.
Thank you very much. So at this stage, I would like to thank you sincerely for your questions, your comments, and for coming to attend our public forum. Thank you very much for spending your time here. So I'd like now to turn to my panelists, each one of them to respond to any of the questions.
And also to give their closing remarks. Be as brief as possible, if possible in less than a minute. Our time was up to 13 hours already overshot. So I start with Ms. Linda Kasonde, coming all the way here and end with State Council.
Okay, so I'll address a number of the questions as well. So Ms. Kamanzi, I don't know your new name, I apologize, asked what we're doing to circulate these views in the broader society. First of all, I just like, in defense of civil society, it costs money to go around the country. And so it's much easier to use the media to reach everyone, which is what people are doing by going on radio and TV. But as I mentioned, civil society has also been going into the provinces to do their part. And with regards to chapter 1, I was very impressed the other day. I turned on my TV and on ZNBC was Henry Mulinga speaking in Bemba to people explaining what Bill 7 and the constitution making process is all about. So there is some effort in that regard. And then there was a question by another lady as to what makes governments, successive governments, try and amend the constitution so freely every time they come into office. And for me, it's a number of things. Firstly, opportunism, because they want to do something that will increase their chances of winning the next election. But also, I think we don't have Democrats, people who truly believe in democracy, who are in charge of this country. We don't have people who have a respect for the Constitution, who are leading us. And those flaws, I think, mainly stem from a lack of civic education at the lower levels when you're being educated in primary schools all the way up to secondary school. So I think more needs to be done in that regard. Then with regards to research, I think Mr. Zaza asked, he said none of us have done any research on whether delimitation should be done or not. And to that I would say, neither did the government, because when they announced that delimitation would be done, the report was nowhere near ready or released. So how did they base the decision to increase the number of MPs by 90? Where did that come from? The report wasn't released. It hadn't been released. So what did you base it on, my dear, is what I'm asking you. Then lastly, how far would we go to protect the Constitution? So I've been in this, an activist for many years, and one of the things I've tried to do in my activism is to say that it's not up to just a few of us to defend this Constitution. State Council referred to the constitutional provisions that talk about the civic duty placed on every citizen to uphold and defend the Constitution. It shouldn't just be the people on this panel or anyone in civil society. We all have a part to play. And then lastly, my closing remarks are that we will never achieve perfection in any constitution-making process. And what we must attempt to do is to ensure that whatever processes we follow have the mandate of the people. They need to come from the people and not from the government. And that has been the downfall of every single constitution-making process in this country. And then also, there's a question around whether State Council thinks it's the timing, is it the process, is it the content, is all of the above. Because if you don't get that mixture correct, then the process will be flawed. The process is as important as the content. And so, I don't think it's up to any of us to decide whether or not we need to make further constitutional amendments. The decision should come from the people. And that decision should be respected by the government and us as citizens. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Landilani?
I'll start with the issue of delimitation. And in that respect, what I want to say is I'll echo the first thing that I said, that in 2020, the Minister of Justice gave us a report and said that from a report that was given, 90 constituencies should be created. In the current constitution, we are seeing 50. The long and short of it is that there is public discontent with respect to the delimitation methodology that is being used. Wrong or right, delimitation may or may not be needed, but the method and methodology that is being used currently is one that leaves a lot of public dissatisfaction because of the fact that we have not seen the delimitation report. If it is there, that is to start with. And I would also like to echo the fact that when it comes to delimitation of constituencies, it speaks to the role of a member of parliament. I'll piggyback on what Kenya has done, where Zambia borrowed its constitutional provisions. There was a case that was litigated in Kenya which said that the role of a member of parliament is to legislate, not to give service delivery. The role of a member of parliament is not to build a school, it's to argue on the law about what a school is, about what a constitution is. But we have mixed up the role of member of parliament to what the role of local government is. I think that is a very important issue. Right or wrong, maybe there is not sufficient civic education on it, but the member of parliament is not responsible for building a school or a hospital, giving money for when there is a funeral. No, it's to argue in parliament about the nature and process content of the law. That is what the role of the member of parliament should be. And as such, you cannot have 1,000 constituencies. We don't need that. We just need people who can argue in parliament about the nature, role, process, content, and provisions of the law. That's one issue. Another issue, just give me, because I didn't get so many questions. Another issue is this, right? That when we meet in such fora, yes, it is very important to be aware of what I would call our positionality, right? We can be aware of how we diverge, but we also have to be aware of what we are trying to achieve, right? To a very large extent, what we have done, like I said in my first address, is that we are doing an us and them thing. And when we are consistently doing an us and them dialogue in a constitution-making process, then we will not achieve the very thing that I think State Council Mr. Shonga has said, which is to build consensus. Consensus building is the most important part of constitution making, and that means two things. Number one, being aware of where we differ. Number two, being aware of where we agree. And when we have that conversation, we have that conversation with the broad objective of what we are trying to achieve. I think that to a very large extent we have met in this room, we have made strides. And I'll end on, we are constitutional defenders. That speaks to one very important thing, which is Article 8 of the Constitution, citizenship. Citizenship means that each and every person is a defender of the Constitution in the position that they occupy. In the position that you occupy as a speaker, as a person that asks a question, as a person that answers a question, you are defending the Constitution. So the various positions that we all hold in the various areas of influence and areas of power that we hold, we are defending the Constitution. But how do we do that? We should be very aware of what our biases are. But if we make the biases that we hold, political, civil, or whatever, if we make them come to the fore, then we're not defending the Constitution. We're simply defending our position. The position should be the Constitution and not the position that we hold in defending the Constitution.
Thank you.
And I think that is clear.
Thanks. Thank you very much. Mr. President.
Unlike State Council Sangwa, I'm not yet 60. Someone texted me to say, and State Council said, we must not be laughing, therefore. We must be sad people. I just saw someone who is also below 60 says, today is Friday. State Council has decreed that we must be drinking because we must not be laughing. But I don't think that's what State Council was trying to stress. I am a happy under 60-year-old person because when I see the majority of this group, it is predominantly young people. we have more stake in this country than some of our leaders and some of our MPs and some of even senior citizens. I think we have a higher duty to defend the Constitution and also to engage in robust discussions that will make our country a better place. For a long time, I think we have burdened politicians with everything. It is no wonder that even when the rain doesn't come, we blame the president. He's a bad president, that's why there's a drought. Not at all. I think it's incumbent upon all of us to do our fair share to contribute to the progression of this country to sustainable development. So why I am happy is because we have begun to do that which government is expecting. National consultation on a constitutional reform process. Let's forget our biases. Let's forget what we thought is good or bad, because nothing is cast in stone insofar as government is concerned. In Bill 7, we can rewrite each and every clause, but maybe even better. Then the country will benefit better. That way, and it's my call, that let's seize this opportunity to discuss how we can progress. Going forward and looking at the various hands that I think were raised, it is clear that we need more conversations. We need more discussions. What we want to propose from the last side is that now we'll be addressing thematic areas. So if the next forum comes, we just dedicate to delimitation and maybe by-elections. Nothing beyond this. That way, we'll be able to get better conversations and even proposals about how to go forward. If we dedicate the whole forum on specific issues, how can we increase the number of MPs? Or how do we deal or get rid of by-elections? I think the results of these consultations will be enriching to the country, but it also help government to have a better product should the consultations reveal that we must proceed and reform the Constitution. So I wanted to just indicate that I'm very grateful for the robust conversations. The Constitution is a very attractive tool in the hands of a politician. It is no wonder that Bill 10 and Bill 7 are not so different, but the people defending or supporting them or supporting them will change. Some of the arguments that we are restating here have been made by others when we're dealing with Bill 10. But the same counter-arguments that were made at other time, politicians will change their positions. But beyond that, I think it's important for all of us to realize that this is it's our document, all of us, and we have a civic duty to help our politicians to facilitate any reform of the process that ultimately benefits us.
Thank you very much. State Council.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kaba, and once again, thank you to the President of LAS for the invitation. I commend you for taking time to come, but the point I'd like to make is that we must always remember that we are one as a people. Okay, what binds us together is far greater than what divides us. I think it is important to remember that. But we live in a country that is so polarized, but we should fight that. Okay, because when something goes wrong, we will perish. Okay, here it is, whatever policies that are made, good or bad, they impact us in the same way. Problems doesn't choose your political affiliation. So in gathering like this, let's speak as one. Let's speak in terms of what is good for the republic. We only have one republic. Let's not behave as though that we can trash this country and then go and migrate to other countries. No, we don't. Okay, so to focus on the issue that has been raised, my sister there, you are a defender of the Constitution. Every citizen is. Okay? We all have to stand. It's not just for those of us that are educated. Every Zambian is a defender of the Constitution. And that is why Article 43(2) says, a citizen, every citizen shall endeavor to acquire basic understanding of this Constitution and promotes its ideals and objective. It's a duty of every citizen. You can't just make claim rights. You also have obligations to this country. Okay? And that is why I'm saying the challenge that we have is not so much, for me it is too premature. My arguments have remained the same. The ones advanced against Bill 10 are the same. We don't need any amendment. Let's test this document first. A lot of the challenges that we are talking about, guys, can be addressed in a statute. You don't need, whenever you have a challenge, and if you can see, our Constitution has been constantly gaining in size. Okay? The Independence Constitution was something like 110 or 105 articles. Today, what is it? The current Constitution is about maybe three times that. Now, where are you going to end up? Okay? So in the process, we now have more complications. The Constitution itself may end up being a problem as opposed to a solution. Okay? So I'm not a supporter of frequent constitutional amendments. I do not. Okay? I have never supported amendment of the Constitution willy-nilly. I have not. I maintain my position against Bill 10, and I maintain my position, the same position against Bill 7. We need to understand this instrument first. We don't know it. There are good things in that instrument. Okay? And it takes a lifetime. A lot of those provisions have to be tested. Problems. It's not. It's not. A lot of the things again, the issue of delimitation is a very complex issue, but a lot of misinformation that is there. Somebody said, well, the Electoral Commission sat down and recommended. The question is, do they even have the powers to make such recommendations? Do they? Check the Constitution. The powers of the Electoral Commission are clear. It is to manage elections. Okay? It is the executive that must make a determination. These constituencies, for whatever reason, they've become too big or whatever challenges, because remember, we have separation of powers. Okay? Only the executive can make a determination to say, you know what, we need extra constituencies. And that has to be justified. If at all the executive, they push it to parliament, they increase it to, say, 200, that is when ECZ comes in. To make that a reality. It has never been the function of ECZ to recommend increasing the number of constituencies. Never. You go back in history, you never find that. Check the Constitution. It's not one of the functions of ECZ. So, these are all technical things, but we need to educate ourselves about these things. Our biggest problem is we have no respect for the Constitution. Okay? So, we try to bend the Constitution to suit us. No, we should bend to the Constitution. That is what we should be doing. Okay, so there is a lot of civic education to be undertaken. How do you change an instrument you don't even know, which you don't even understand? You have never even read it from cover to cover. You have never read it. How do you start changing it? Let me conclude by saying this. No president takes oath to say he's going to change the Constitution. You know what the oath says? I shall defend and uphold the Constitution. Therefore, the demand to change the Constitution should come from the people, and it is for the executive to implement that. It should never come from the executive branch of government. Let me stop there.
Thanks. Thank you very much. So thanks to all of you for coming to this forum, for your active participation, and for demonstrating your interest in key governance issues affecting our nation. So thanks very much. My gratitude